Democrats are a bunch of snot-nosed shitheads. There's no doubt about it. This is coming from someone who voted for Obama twice. Their obsession with identity politics has caused them to have an irrational, vitriolic hatred towards young men for the oppression and discrimination caused by old men. They're literally demonizing you for evil things that happened before you were even born. When you combine this with their shady election practices, Kamala wasn't even actually voted to be the nominee. There's nothing I would like to see more than the Democrat Party completely crash and burn. With all that being said, I'm here today to burn all your hopium that conservatives are any better. I get it. When one party is constantly demonizing and antagonizing you, it's natural to want to go to the other side in rebellion. At least they're not openly and publicly antagonizing you, which is better than the Democrats. Or so it seems on the surface. You see, there's one thing I can say for certain about Democrats. They don't really give a flip about minorities or women or the LGBTQ community. They pander to them to get their votes, and that's it. None of their policies actually benefit minorities in any practical sense, though. And I can say the exact same thing when it comes to conservatives and young men. In fact, most conservative policies and practices are actually horrible for young men. Consider this. We can all agree that conservatives are by far the more war-thirsty party between the two. If you're Gen Z, you're probably too young to remember the presidency of George W. Bush. But as a millennial, he was my introduction into American politics. He was super trigger-happy to start wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, all over the Middle East. He did it under premises of weapons of mass destruction, which famously were never ever found. He recklessly sent in thousands of young men to be killed on the battlefields based on incorrect information, and you know that migrant crisis you see today that has completely destroyed Western Europe? The seeds of it were planted in George Bush's Iraq War in 2003. It's still affecting us today. Now, 2003 was a much, much less politically polarizing time than the present day. George Bush is extremely, even boringly moderate compared to Donald Trump. Trump is way more brash, egotistical, and hot-headed. He is unquestionably way more likely to start a war than George W. Bush. Now, this wouldn't be such an issue if we were living in a relatively peaceful climate, geopolitically speaking. But right now we are living in the polar opposite of that. There are already two major wars going on right now in Israel and Ukraine. This isn't even counting all the potential wars on the horizon, with the tensions mounting between China and Taiwan, for example. If conservatives get elected and run the world, who do you think is going to be the first ones shipped off to die in wars? It's going to be us young men. This is what is worst about conservatives. They're a bunch of old men who already lived their lives. They themselves would never go off to fight their own wars on the battlefield. They want to sit in a comfortable, luxurious suite behind closed doors while they give you orders and send you off to die in their wars. Okay, so far we've only talked about wars. But let's pretend like everything hypothetically goes perfectly the next 4 years, and the wars come to an end. It probably won't. But let's just play best case scenario for now. Conservative economic policies are also just as horrible for young men. Again, I'm going to redirect your attention to George W. Bush. I'm too young myself to remember a world where the economy was good, and it was easy to get a job as a young man. I know that world existed at one point, but it was long before I became an adult and could enter the job market. I do, however, remember the first summer of middle school. When I was 11 years old, this was when Bush was already president, but it was early in his presidency, so he didn't have enough time to screw everything up yet. That summer, I had heard from a friend around my age that he got a job as a newspaper delivery boy and was making around $300 a month, which was a lot of money back then, especially for an 11-year-old. I then naturally wanted to get that job myself, and so I asked my friend if he could help me get a job as well. I didn't have to fill in any application. I didn't have to make any BS resume or CV. I didn't have to apply to a million places online and go through a million BS interviews. He asked for me, and the newspaper service gave me a job literally a few days later. It was seriously that simple. I was 11, I just finished my first year of middle school. I didn't even have a middle school diploma, let alone a high school diploma or a college degree, and it was that damn easy to get a job. It was seriously easier to get a job as an 11-year-old middle schooler back then than it is to get a job in my 30s today, which is why I just moved overseas. This is why you shouldn't let these delusional boomers gaslight you into thinking that you're the problem and you just need more skills or more education to get a job. There's no way in hell I was more skilled or qualified as an 11-year-old than I am now. The economy was just better back then. Things were just easier back then. That's all that's to it. Conservative economy philosophy is based on trickle-down principles. The idea that if you cut taxes for the rich and empower the rich as much as possible, naturally they will create more jobs and pay higher wages for the middle class and the poor. If this really worked, I just have to ask, why are all you guys not swimming in cash right now? The rich are richer than they've ever been, by light years. If their success would naturally trickle down to you, shouldn't you all be far better off economically right now than in the 2000s, when the gap between rich and poor was far less? I personally checked out of society a long time ago. So I don't know how the modern workforce is for young men today. You guys can definitely correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on anything I'm about to say. But from what I've heard, young men are treated exceptionally dog shit in the workplace today. You got people on the left who demonize you and promote every other oppressed group of people over you. But it's no better on the right either. The old conservative boomers, who are mostly in charge of businesses today, also treat young men like trash. They throw you at cheap blue-collar labor when they need you. They exploit you. They pay you dog shit wages. And of course, being the selfish, greedy generation that they are, they never mentor you or give you any raises. They just spend all their time calling you lazy and entitled for not wanting to accept their dog shit conditions. It's this really weird political tug-of-war going on right now to see which side can shit on young men more. Liberals are the first to demonize you and antagonize you for things that happened before you were even born. Conservatives are the first to send you off to die in wars, or just keep you tied down to bullshit cheap labor in career dead-end jobs, while they continue to profit more and more off you. In case it wasn't clear already, I'm not here to defend liberals at all. I'm here to tell you that both sides are giga dog shit. The world is changing at a rapid pace, and with AI on the rise, I'm sure nothing is going to be the same in a decade, if not sooner. Maybe the problem with both Democrats and Republicans now is that both of them have been around for hundreds of years and are just built on outdated principles at this point. Whenever I criticize capitalism in my videos, there's always this loose cannon comment like, "Oh, so you want to go back to socialism?" No, I'm sick of thinking of everything in these black and white binary terms. Why is it so hard to grasp that two things can both suck? Capitalism, socialism, and communism are all outdated, archaic systems that clearly don't even function in the modern day, let alone a decade into the future. What if the future is just going to require a complete new system entirely? One that doesn't exist yet? One that we Gen Z and millennials are going to have to invent and build from scratch? The boomers are starting to get old. They're not always going to be around. We can blame them now, which is pretty much what this channel's all about. But we're not going to be able to blame them forever. One day, we're going to be the ones in charge of the world, politically and economically. And I just hope by then, we'll have figured out a better system for the next generation than what the boomers left us.